This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.
All right, hey everybody, it's John Hall, the senior editor of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, and sitting across from me right now is Christopher Sidwa. He is the co-founder of the Sydney, Australia-based Batch Brewing Co. They're a craft brewery that makes beer the traditional way, handcrafted batch by batch. He's also the author of Brew a Batch, a beginner's guide to home-brewed beer. Chris, we're going to talk a lot about being down under, but first, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, John.
And we're going to talk about your lack of accent in just a second as well. But first, as the brewing industry's premier choice for glycol chilling, G&D Chillers has set the standard on quality, service, reliability, and dedication to their customers' craft. For 25 years, G&D has led the way with innovative solutions for the craft brewing industry. Contact G&D Chillers today at 1-800-555-0973 or reach out online at gdchillers.com. Mention Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast, this one that you're listening to right now, and you'll receive up to $1,000 worth of glycol with the purchase of any new G&D Chiller unit. And also, stay connected to the heart of craft beer and the revolutionary tastemakers behind every can and bottle. Download the free Tabor app to get highly rated independent craft beer delivered right to your door. Recent featured beers include Within Us from Anchorage, Stargate Nectarine from Black Project, King Sue from Toppling Goliath, Ninja vs. Unicorn from Pipeworks, and Beer du Pays from Side Project. Get $10 in beer money today with the code BREWING. All right, Chris Sidwa, Batch Brewing Company, Sydney, Australia. We're sitting here in New Jersey, though, which is where you're originally from.
Yes, we're in South Orange. I grew up in Maplewood, one town over. Come home after 11 years of being abroad, 6 of which were running Batch. Family reasons, it's time to be home with the grandparents, and yeah.
And you're still going to stay involved with the brewery, though?
Yes, very much. So my work day right now, or my work week, begins on Sunday night, checking in with the team, making sure they have what they need to be productive for the week. Paying bills, ordering materials, making sure the schedule's full. And unfortunately, it does mean I have a lot of sort of 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Sessions on the phone, but there's a nap in the middle of the day for me, and I seem to be making it work.
But sort of the interesting thing in being back here in the States where, the beer culture is what it is, and I think that the rest of the world is sort of looking at the U.S. right now for inspiration, and certainly there's brewers standing up and delivering all the time. You being able to visit some of these breweries, being immersed in this culture, can probably filter back into what's happening back at home.
What's happening in Australia is definitely unique to Australia. There's tax rules, there's drinking cultures, there's just differences. But yes, absolutely, the pointy end of the beer nerdery is always looking at what they've tried when they've been on a holiday. What magazines like yours are talking about, what the taste makers are talking about. I haven't been asked to brew a dessert beer yet. I'm sure that's coming.
Pastry stouts haven't made their way down under. Okay.
Maybe somebody's done it, but I'm not aware. But I've kind of had my head in different places over the last 6 months, preparing to move and starting a second brewery and a new bar. I've been a little bit distracted and leaving some of the creativity to my brewing team. But now that we're settled down a little bit, I look forward to getting out, seeing what folks in New Jersey and New York are doing, and filtering some of that back down there with a little bit of a lens of what will and won't work in Australia, because I do have 11 years of drinking good beer there to be able to figure out what's going to fly.
So I'm curious, there's a lot that I want to unpack from all of that, but so the pastry stout has been, in a lot of ways, localized desserts, for places. So like, you see, some of the cannolis or, around in this area, or bear claws up in New England and things like that. Would there be a quintessential Australian dessert that could make its way into a pastry stout, do you think?
Off the top of my head, there's the Lamington, so chocolate and coconut.
Okay.
Perfect beer compliments. We do a chocolate coconut huge Kahuna. We do a big Kahuna, which is a coconut brown ale. This time of year, we also do one batch of the huge Kahuna, which came out a couple weeks ago, which basically is a Lamington beer. So maybe I stand corrected. So
you've done it.
I've already gotten there. Off the top of my head, nothing's jumping out at me beyond that one. But there is a huge food culture down there, which definitely has a hand in the beer culture. So it's just a matter of time before bakeries and brewers get together and figure that out. There are some really fancy donut shops. So Wayward, who's a brewery around the corner from us, they have a donut shop across the street from them, and they've done a couple of donut beers. I think that's it that I can think of, though.
You mentioned, and I had a chance to visit your brewery a couple years ago, briefly, but the thing that I was sort of struck when I was in Australia and New Zealand a few years ago is that there is outside influence, but for the most part, it is a fairly self-contained market. Like, there's not a lot of beers that make their way outside of the country, or at least over here, as far as like what's the majority of stuff that's being made. Like, there's demand for local beer to stay local. And that you can expand out if you want to, but for the most part, like, you can also do really well if you stay local. And I think that sort of fits into you started to talk about a little bit about like the drinking culture and how important local is, and even food wise, local is.
The food system there has never quite gotten as industrialized as it has in the States. And I think people, because of a TV show called MasterChef, which is English, I think it was even here, but in Australia it was a huge hit.
That's the one with the angry guy? That's Gordon Ramsay?
In Australia, It's got a couple local guys who do it, but it just means that, folks in their suburban houses have gotten really passionate about finding the best raw materials to make the best meals with. We do that in our brewery, and in the brewing world, people are asking for the same sorts of things. So we've been working with a farmer who became a maltster. It was the first one in Australia that I'm aware of in generations.
Sure.
And that means that our raw materials, the vast majority of them, come 6 hours by truck instead of getting shipped all over the country, or worse, from around the world. And it means that we get to have a little bit more impact or decision making in terms of what gets grown, which means for the first time we're not using barley that's grown or bred and grown for super high alcohol potential, but instead it's grown for flavor. So it's a lower attenuating base malt. It means we get a bit of a fuller, tastier beer. And there's only a few farmers left in the country who were smart enough to hold on to some of that seed. And we luckily enough got connected with one. It was very fortuitous. And as a couple of home brewers who were on a farm, who were trying to figure out how to stay on a farm, just the way farm economics goes, fewer and fewer people are needed to do that, larger and larger production of raw materials. So, where there were 10 jobs a decade ago, there's one. So as you grow up in that industry, those families or in that industry, most of them have to go out and find other work. And that's what these guys had to do. One became a teacher, the other a financial planner. But now they're both back in a malt house close to the farm where they want to be, and selling malt all over the country. So we get to have a local material. From that, we get to make what we think of as really New South Wales or Australian beer. But there's a lot of inputs coming from, or inspiration coming from overseas. Like, as I said, people are aware of what's happening.
Oh, of course.
It's not entirely blocked off. It is an island that's far from everything. If you want to get on a plane, like, the closest thing's 5 hours away.
Yeah.
And then in terms of beer leaving the country, I guess a lot of it is made to stay. The industry is relatively young. A few of us have been lucky enough to be able to get some good quality control tools, and we're doing the best we can to make our beer shelf stable.
Yeah.
But many don't have that luxury, and the thought of putting it on a truck to go across the desert, let alone on a boat to cross the equator, is just outside of any expectation. So,
and that's a question that I've seen you get this in the past, and just for full disclosure, I mean, I've known you for years now. We're in South Orange, which is my hometown. I grew up knowing your wife and her family. Like we've, it's weird that like we've crossed paths in the beer world, but like personally, like we've known each other for longer than we've been in the beer industry, but or covering the beer industry. But I've seen you get the question in the past of, well, you have this brewery in Australia. Are you going to bring the beers here to the U.S.? You're a U.S. guy. Like, don't you want your beers being served in Jersey? And I've seen you shut that down so fast of just absolutely not. Like, I don't want to do that. Like, you're committed to this local.
I am, and I'll come back to that in a second.
Sure.
There are a few folks in Australia who have done a good job of getting their beer outside of the country, and for the most part, I believe they're finding production in the market where they're having the beer sold.
Okay.
There are some kegs that do travel, but some of the bigger end of town is part of corporations who own breweries in different places and are able to do that.
Sure.
Little Creatures is opening a brewery bar in San Francisco. I think they've already got one in London. So you do have a few people doing a few things. Four Pines, which is recently ABI, now Asahi maybe.
Oh yeah, the recent sale was just announced. Yeah. I don't know if it's closed yet, but yeah.
But they're working on getting some beer or have gotten some beer into California. So there is a little bit of that stuff happening at the pointy end of town. But yeah, I mean.
And in some cases, I imagine like it'd be kind of fun to do that because the rest of the world thinks of Foster's, right? I mean, it's just there was a brilliant marketing campaign. So to have something that represents Australia out there that's not that, that's not this kangaroo labeled whatever industrial lager. Like there's got to be some appeal for some of these brewers to do that.
And I'm happy that they do it
Yeah.
if they've got the means and they're happy to test that out. And I'm glad that they do. I think, it's been 6 weeks since I've landed back in New Jersey and, we've got this second brewery and bar opening up and that's been dominating my time. But I do foresee at some point after that settles in and, my family, my wife is expecting in sort of 8-10 weeks. Once baby 2 kind of settles down and I can, pick my head up again, I do think I'm going to get interested in finding out whether or not my brand will fly in this country, or more specifically in New Jersey. And at that point, if my business partner and I decide that it's worth exploring, I would look to find some local production, utilize local raw materials. So it would be a new story. It wouldn't be taking those flavors that we create in Sydney and bringing them to New Jersey. It would be figuring out how to bring that ethos to New Jersey and whether or not that's got any legs.
And that, I think, for smaller breweries these days is the way to go because it's one of the better ways of doing authenticity versus just brand marketing for a lot of the things. I mean, I've talked to brewers on this show in the past who have said, the days of the million barrel breweries are over for the most part. There's probably nobody new who's going to open up in the foreseeable future who's going to hit 1 million barrels. Founders is probably going to be the last. And so you have to find other ways to diversify. And there's, folks like Evan Watson up at Plan B in the Hudson Valley of New York who everything that goes into his beer is grown on his farm. Yeah. It's sort of this amazing... and we see that more and more these days. And that, to me, I guess, is that a better... One, you have to believe in that to do it, right? If you're just doing it to put it on a label, people will see through that eventually.
You can't scale it up right now. I mean, the craft, for lack of a better term, raw material industry isn't ready to produce what an industrial brewer would need if they wanted to scale it up. So the two have to go hand in hand and grow together. But for me, I'm not a brand guy. I'm not a marketing guy. I'm an economist and a brewer and an environmentalist. And I'm not too fussed about brand for the sake of pushing batch out to people. I'm much more interested in how to do things in a new and sustainable and thoughtful way. And along the way, you get to create and tell that story. So I mean, we don't have to bring our flavors with us and set up some huge high-scale operation to push it out into the world. I mean, we can just tinker, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, just find something different to fill our time with. So we're quite busy in Sydney. Like, this is just, fortuitous that I'm here and able to look into this. But the Australian market is still our focus. There's so much happening there. It is very similar to the U.S. in that there have been a few high-profile people building large breweries, and it's getting crowded. So our goal right now is to not focus so much on growing capacity as it is growing more drinkers, because in my view, you've got a hell of a lot more beer being produced than there are craft beer fans. So
sure.
The whole industry needs to stop installing stainless and start selling to the punters who are buying.
Converting people.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen that here in the U.S. that overall drinkership of craft, independent, whatever, is around 13%, and it's been sort of in that general area for the last couple of years as well. So it's craft talking to craft, where it really should be craft talking to the people who are still going out and making drinking natter days, or drinking hard seltzer, or become a brewery that makes a natter day and makes a hard seltzer, and then but just pushes it from a local angle.
Yeah, I heard you a while ago, this would go back years, just in a casual conversation, saying we need to stop talking about craft beer. It's just beer. We're all doing the same thing. And that's it. Like, just because mine is small doesn't make it better or more authentic. It just means that I'm talking to fewer people. And if I want my business to grow, I need to talk to more people. And that's where we're spending a lot of our time. So our brewery is actually the second one that we're building. We've got 10 barrels installed in a facility with 17, 20-barrel tanks. So it's for us, it's a decent cellar. Keeps us busy, but we're not full. By no means are we at full capacity. So rather than expanding and building a bigger brewery where we didn't need it, we've actually gone and built a smaller brewery. So we've got a 3-barrel system with 10 3-barrel fermenters that are going to let us focus all of our creative energy on these smaller batches to test processes. If we want to refine existing beers, we'll be able to do that. If we want to build a pipeline of new releases, we'll be able to do that. If we want to brew just a wacky, crazy beer with some raw material that we can never get at a 10-barrel scale, then we can do that too. We can have some fun. And in the same time, we're having that creative outlet. We'll still be able to produce on a bigger level to reach the national market, and to continue to make that brewery safer, more efficient, and just a more pleasurable place to work. It's been a fun journey. Lots of challenges, getting that production to where it is. Just constantly spending money.
Yeah.
Installing new equipment, moving.
Well, that's the
around.
universal language. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's it's got a few more things to do to make it really efficient, and then I think we'll have a nice play of these two breweries that bounce off each other, and one feeding the other and the other pushing it out in decent volume. But again, just got to keep being creative and keep talking about what we're doing, and the goals that we've got and the flavors we're trying to create, and hopefully keep attracting some of these drinkers who've just been bland beered to death.
All right, we'll dive into that more in just a minute. But first, I just want to thank another one of our sponsors, PackTech, which delivers the highest quality and most environmentally responsible packaging handles to the craft beer industry. PackTech handles are made from 100% post-consumer recycled material and are repurposed from recycled milk jugs. In addition, they're also 100% recyclable. PackTech recently launched its own recycling program to ensure PackTech handles are properly recycled and repurposed. They are easy to apply by hand or increase your packaging efficiency with their robust line of automated applicators. PackTech's packaging solutions deliver better market presence, enhanced consumer value, environmental awareness, and improved sales. PackTech handles are the smart and sustainable packaging choice. Contact PackTech today at area code 541-461-5000 or visit them at packtech-opi.com. That's packtech-opi.com. Also, balancing barley and hops is your expertise. And for Clarion Lubricants, food-grade lubricants is theirs. The team at Clarion knows that when it comes to making great beer, you're the expert. And when it comes to supplying food-grade lubricants backed by service-oriented professionals, they're the experts. Clarion will work with you to create an efficient lubrication program that helps protect your brewery. To speak with an expert, dial 1-855-MY-CLARION. That's 1-855-692-5274, or visit clarionlubricants.com. Clarion Lubricants, the experts that experts trust. We talked about malt, and you're Chris Sidwa of Batch Brewing Company. We talked about malts, and I think the one thing that everybody gets excited about in the Southern Hemisphere are the hops that are being grown there. And
Yes.
you have access to the farms there. You guys are probably out on hop selection. You guys are doing the whole thing to really get the freshest, the most exciting, the vibrant hops that get the world noticing and interesting. And that's probably been the number one thing that has, I'm imagining, supercharged the craft industry, the beer industry down by you guys, is the hop crop and the attention that the rest of the world is sort of paying, and then the benefit that you as a local brewer have been getting.
The Australian hops are really interesting, huge, bold, vibrant flavors. The Australia's probably got one or two, maybe two beer styles that it can claim as its own: the sparkling ale and then the Pacific ale. And the Pacific ale, you can't make it without Galaxy hops. It's just, that is what it is.
What's the rest of the profile of a Pacific ale?
Unfiltered, low ABV, not bitter, just very sessionable. It's the kind of beer you start drinking at 1 o'clock and you can be still drinking at 9 o'clock.
Okay.
It's perfect for a day at the beach, barbecues, cricket games, all those things that Australians love. Very, very vibrant. Stone and Wood made it. They pretty much were it. That was their leading beer. It was the best-selling beer, most popular beer. I shouldn't say best-selling, I don't know that, but most popular beer in the country for years. Recently, some other folks have started making Pacific ales. There were some court cases. Apparently, the government says you can call your beer Pacific ale.
Right. They never trademarked it. Just known for it. It's the whole breakfast stout thing. Yeah.
Fuzzy on the details.
That's
but
fine.
They own that space as far as I'm concerned. I would never touch it. But we love Galaxy hops. What they don't use and we can get our hands on, we love to play with. Kiwi hops are very interesting. So the Australians have had such great success with Galaxy, Vic Secret. Vic Secret was, in my opinion, better.
You love that hop. You're an unabashed fan.
I do.
What is it about that stands out for you? Like, what does it bring to a beer?
Vibrant fruit, but for me, it lasts a little longer in the beer. So some of the issues I've had making beers with Galaxy in the past is that they get a little bit cheesy as the beer starts to age. Vic Secret, I haven't seen that happen. So, we try really hard to make sure our beer's being produced at the rate in which it's being consumed. But when products do sit around a little bit longer, you still crack that, IPA made with Vic Secret, and it smells fantastic. My palate is pretty good, but it's also a little bit binary. It's like I like it or I don't like it. I'm not one of these guys who can taste every single nuance in every single hop. Vic Secret for me is one that I just, more often than not, crack a beer, I like it, and it's in some of the core recipes that are the beers that I reach for the most. So for me, it just works.
But you started to talk about the Kiwi hops then. What's coming out of New Zealand?
Yeah, so Vic Secret, Galaxy, that's kind of it. The guys at HPA have been throwing so much acreage towards Galaxy just to keep up with demand that, there's a few other things that have had to fall away because of it. They've got fixed real estate, so they're growing as fast as they can. But, as Americans and UK brewers are wanting more Galaxy, that's just where they're going. Which means that, as we want to explore more flavors, we're just looking around, and the next best option is the New Zealand crops. And they've got a very broad portfolio, so that makes it interesting. It also makes it challenging because it's kind of like having too much choice because I don't know where to start. But with the 3-barrel brewery, hope to be able to crack into that and start exploring. And they also have a range of organic hops, which is something we'll look into. But yeah, they're having really good crop years. They, being an isolated island that New Zealand is, they seem to be, I shouldn't say immune, touch wood, but they seem to be resistant to some of these other issues agronomically that some of the other hop growing regions have, and they just keep getting good crop after good crop, and it's going to be fun exploring what they're doing.
Yeah. For this new 3-barrel brew house, you've talked about experimenting. You've also talked about refining your processes. And I think that that's one of those things where I've always enjoyed hearing that from brewers, because I remember talking to Ken Grossman years ago where he was saying that, like pale ale is never quite done. They're always looking to, make it better or to adjust. Like you can't just, it's not the Ron Popeil, set it and forget it. Like, okay, we made this, great ones. It's constantly striving to make it, better. You never want to fall backwards. But on a 3-barrel system, what are you looking, or what are you hoping to achieve as far as the refining process? Like where do you want to start? Like what are you excited? Like what avenues are you looking forward to going down just to see what happens?
So our brewery started by myself, my business partner Andrew. We had some good help from a fellow named Topher early on, who was one of the guys playing lacrosse with us when Andrew and I met. But we're all home brewers. I mean, none of us have any formal training. One of my brewers now, Andrew Melly's got some qualification through the Institute of Brewing and Distilling. But we're all home brewers, so we're kind of just guessing half the time. So we want to be able to continue to guess, and we look up to the leaders in the industry. We listen to every podcast and read every book we can, and try to find time to get to industry events and formal education if and when we can.
Yeah.
But we have to be honest. I mean, we're not professional. Well, we're professionals because we bought a brewery and started brewing, but we're not qualified or trained. So some of this stuff is just going to be us testing things that other brewers have already figured out, but might be a little bit tight-lipped about. When to dry hop, how long to dry hop cold, dry hop warm. We haven't used finings. We don't filter. So getting into some of that to extend shelf life and just brighten flavor. I've been reluctant to do it in production because we, can't risk losing a batch and then shorting our customers. But in a smaller facility, we can definitely get away with pushing the boundaries on, shortening dry hops to not extract too much flavor, or, finding the right temperature, whatever it happens to be. And then using different raw materials as well. So our pale ale has been consistent since we started. We did one migration from sort of what I might call industrial raw materials to these, smaller, craftier raw materials, and that took a few batches to nail. But since that changed 3 years ago, we haven't really evolved that product at all. And people's taste buds are evolving, so we have the choice: do we evolve it? Do we keep it stagnant? Do we, keep pleasing the people who love that old standby, or do we try to please the new people who want hoppier, juicier flavors? Maybe it's a different product, maybe it's the same product, but all of that stuff will get tested and evaluated, and we'll have, a 100-seat bar, which is the big purpose for doing this as well. In the small end of town, you need that retail. But we're really going to challenge our brewers to pour the beer, do a bartending shift, ask a lot of questions, get that feedback, and therefore, have it firsthand, and don't rely on the bar staff to relay it to you, because sometimes that just doesn't happen.
And it's a bad game of telephone as well. Yeah.
Yeah. How did this beer land with the population? Oh yeah, it was good. Everyone seemed to like it. Okay, well, I don't know what to do with that. Just brew it again? Like, come on. So forcing the brewers to become a bit more personal and ask questions and get involved is going to hopefully yield some positive feedback, or negative. I mean, but positive in the sense that we'll be able to continue to improve the product.
Yeah. For our brewing industry guy, I was talking to Jeff Irway from La Cumbre Brewing Company down in New Mexico, and he was saying that he actually encourages his shift brewers, and he does it himself, to go out to the bar during happy hours or after their shift and actually talk to the customers, not just sit at the end of the bar by themselves, or but to interact and engage. And he said that it's actually led to better decisions in the brew house. But I'm curious, because you run the risk sometimes of giving the people what they want versus what's actually good to give them.
Yes. Yeah. That's something that's definitely on my mind right now. as we try to formalize our production brewery and get more volume out there, yes, do we lead and say this is what you should be drinking, or do we feed the masses? If the bars are saying, give me a hazy pale, do we just brew that because that's what they want? Or do we say these beers are actually over flavored and you're going to get, your palate's going to get taxed, and you're going to have one, but it's not going to actually sell that well. So there's this sort of challenge. Yes, don't have the answer.
Yeah, and that's sort of the thing, because if to maintain, I think there is the balance between the core brands and something that somebody can go to, but continuously evolving them to make them better, and then the specialty one-offs or the seasonals or the whatever else, the special ingredients that come by. But even something like that with those balances, I mean, that's a tough thing to juggle regardless of your size.
It is. Well, just shifting gears a little bit back to the brewers, getting them face-to-face with people is definitely going to get feedback on what they want. But it's also, here's what I think you should be drinking, because, this is what I do. This is what my profession is.
Well, in that case, it's just going to be all lagers. But yeah,
well,
at least here in the U.S., it's just,
we do
here's
have a
my
couple
Coors
tanks.
Light.
Yeah. But handing them a beer, telling them why they made it, what flavors to expect from it, and then asking that customer, that consumer, did we achieve that? Are you getting that on your palate? I think that's critical feedback. And a lot of brewers, as you said, they're going to sit in the corner, and because we're a lot of us are introverted, myself included.
Yeah.
I find if I'm not actually pouring the beer out, then I don't engage in conversation. So I love doing bar shifts and getting right in there. And people come in and they say, I'll just have a pale ale. And it's like, well, sometimes I got 4. Do you want hoppy? Do you want malty? Do you want something that's a bit hazy? Like, you can, and that overwhelms a lot of people, especially in Sydney. It's still a relatively young market. So rather than making them decide and putting them on the spot, you just hand them 3 beers and say, which of these do you want? This one might have a completely different yeast that if I described it to you, you would just be like, no, that sounds too complicated. But if you drink it, you might go, oh, shit, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So,
and that goes to growing the market as well. So it's not just, craft speaking to craft. It's, you need to grow the overall customer base, and somebody who might come in. I mean, I think the intimidation factor is still the biggest thing.
It is.
For a lot of non-craft drinkers.
Like some people, they don't know how to pronounce Saison.
Sure.
Like, so they're not going to order it because they don't want to sound stupid when they say it. So rather than, we call it a farmhouse because that just takes away the possibility of them not buying it because of the name. But
Jeff O'Neill at Industrial Arts does that as well.
Yeah, cool. And just throw it in their hand and then tell them after the fact. And then 9 times out of 10, they're going to love it anyway. Dark beers. I love dark beers. I love putting them in front of people who think, oh, it's going to be heavy. It's Tooheys Old. It's this fantastic beer. It'd be if Budweiser had a dark beer in their portfolio.
Okay.
I mean, it's been around forever. It's an industrial brand. People have great memories of it, and a lot of people have terrible memories of it. And that's turned an entire generation off of dark beer because they had one of those when they were a kid, and it's too overwhelming. But now you throw our Elsie the Milk Stout or a brown ale in front of somebody, and you just say, try it, and 9 times out of 10, they come across the line. It makes me so happy when you can convert somebody who's got all these preconceived notions. Just give me a lager, give me a pale ale. We've got 10 taps, usually very broad in terms of what the options are, and I pretty much always find something for even the non-beer drinker. But
so back to the experimentation. With your 3-barrel system, you'll be able to explore some new flavors. And I think one of the things that I've really enjoyed about the last couple of years in the beer scene here in America is finding local ingredients or finding exotic fruits or something that speaks to the localness of it all. If it's down in the Carolinas and you're doing something with Moxie soda, or you're out in the Midwest and doing something with like berries that only grow in northern Michigan or something like that. What have you come across that you're excited to mess around with?
First off, we are supporting a young hop farmer. They've done sort of 3 harvests, I think, maybe 2 that have gone commercial. So getting some of these hops, they're traditional hops, Cascade, Saz, Centennial, but they're grown in a region that hasn't grown hops maybe ever before. It's in the mountains. It's relatively similar, sort of climate and geography to the industrial hop areas in Australia, but it's outside of the traditional sort of longitude or latitude or whatever.
And that it's probably not necessarily going to remind you too much of Cascade Centennial.
Exactly. It's New South Wales Cascade. I mean, if they could change the name, that would be better, because it's probably not going to taste anything like what you expect it to. But that's a raw material that we look forward to playing with more. There's a bunch of fruits that we've been buying our stone fruit from a guy. He's the last grower in the Sydney Basin. Real estate development has just exploded. It's all residential now. All the farmers are getting pushed out. He grows really good fruit. He's got these incredible blood plums that come out Christmas time. But sitting there and chopping fruit for 2 days straight just to make a full-size batches.
And Christmas time in Australia is what, 100 degrees?
Plus.
Okay.
Yeah. But that beer comes out vibrant and beautiful and just, it's fantastic, and people look forward to it.
I don't know if I've ever had a blood plum. I know
they
blood
might be
oranges,
called black or red plums here. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Down in the shop, there's
you've
a few
seen them
varieties
here in the U.S. Okay.
But it's that plum that's sort of got a blackish skin and a very, very, very dark purpley red flesh. And it just adds great flavor, but incredibly vibrant color. So we'll be able to continue to support them. Not answering your question exactly. We work with a frozen fruit provider who's importing a fair bit of stuff, very unique things. I mean, I had to go on Wikipedia just to figure out what the hell he's got. So we'll get to play with some of that. There's a lot of, bush tucker. There's a lot of stuff that Australians go foraging for. The flavors are intense.
Like what? Like, for example, I mean that's a totally just foreign concept for me.
Yeah, I'm not the greatest on this, but there's these Davidson plums which are incredibly sour. There's things like lemon myrtle. There's stuff that just grows wild. That again, they're just the climate is harsh. It feels like after 60,000 years of evolution over there that only the most intense could survive. And the flavors are intense as well. So when we get in and start playing around with them, we're going to have to be quite restrained.
And that goes back to your home brewing background. And I do want to point out. I mean, you have the book that came out, Brew a Batch: The Beginner's Guide to Homebrewed Beer, which came out a couple of months ago. You still have that bug in you, right? I mean, you strike me as a guy who still seems to identify, even though you have a professional operation, as still very much the home brewer, and still the very much like, you want to follow certain things, but you also want to, have some fun with it as well.
Yeah, our brewery is a big home brewing setup. I mean, we're going to evolve a little bit. Like I said, we don't filter. I don't have any intention of filtering. We are starting to use some finings. These are things I never used in my home brewing because you don't have to. I just preferred to make something that was a little more natural or less produced. And our brewery will continue to go down both paths. We'll see what the market wants more of. I'm just so focused right now. I have a young baby, this growing business, that my head has been entirely just going back to what I know, which is keeping the books, making sure the bills are paid. And I've been outsourcing to my team some of the creativity. But again, as I think things settle in with our expansion projects and my personal family, I can't wait to get a homebrewing kit, start messing around with stuff here. I think I'll go back to the method that I teach in the book, which is just extract and some specialty grains. I don't need to run a mash. I didn't have time for it when I had a day job and only had weekends to mess around with making beer. And quite frankly, like with kids, as you would know, it's like you don't have time necessarily for a long brew day. So if I can truncate it, just get my fermentables from some extract and still be able to play with the flavor from the specialty malts, the fruits, the yeast, then I'm going to get everything out of it that I need without the added sort of pain of grinding and mashing and all the rest.
You just touched upon something that we've been talking about at the office a little bit, and I'm starting to hear more and more from brewers as well is that, yes, beer is a business. And first and foremost, you have to think about it, that way. It's a creative business, but you have to worry about the spreadsheets, and you have to worry about making payroll and the deliveries going out on time and the ingredients coming in and making sure that you have enough in the tanks and all of that. And when you're a home brewer, you're not necessarily thinking about that because there's none of that involved in it. And I'm starting to hear more and more from brewers that they miss those days, that you wake up one morning and it's 15 years later, it's 10 years later, and you say, my God, I haven't been on the brew deck in forever. Or, I've delegated to my team and I love the beers that, this company that I created, that I put my heart and soul into is making, but I'm not doing that. And so you're starting to see folks either transition out and go back into or find new creative pursuits as far as like distilling or winemaking or other things like where they can start to flex those creative muscles again and sort of give up some of the business aspects to go back to what brought them into it in the first place.
I think that's a natural progression. I mean, for us, it was if we just brew a little bit more each week and sell a little bit more, then we'll be able to afford a staff member to help us do this. And then before you know it, like you've got all these staff members that you need to manage, and then you don't get to do what you set out to do in the first place. So it's not surprising to hear that, in the industry here where it's a little more mature, folks have gotten their business to the point where they can come back to being creative. That's definitely something that we're conscious of. I mean, Andrew is dedicated to getting into the small brewery and producing something once a week or every other week or whatever works. I'm heading down to Sydney to see the opening next week, and I've got a choice. I can either let my team brew the beer, or I can get myself in there and do it, because if I don't do it now, I might never get a chance to brew on this new system we've just installed.
So you're going to do it?
I'm pushing myself to do it.
What are you going to brew?
I haven't decided yet.
What do you want to brew?
I am, as you can probably tell by some of my answers, I am at a creative writer's block right now. I've got nothing flowing, so all my brain power has just been sucked up with other things. So, it is, as I speak this week and last, calming down for me, and I'm trying to get out and taste a few beers and find some inspiration, but I just can't commit to something right now.
We'll come down to the house. We'll open up the cellar. It'll be fun.
The Keller beer from Weinstefaner, the 512, 516. That's interesting to me. Just simple. I gave it to my mother-in-law. I gave it to my father. Like people who are not beer drinkers, just this tastes like what beer should taste like, and I like it. So,
and that's how you get the people around.
Yeah.
In a minute, I'm going to ask you what you wish you knew back as a home brewer that you know now. But first, I want to thank our episode sponsors. G&D Chillers, the premier choice for glycol chilling. You can go ahead and use the Tavour app to get highly rated independent craft beer delivered right to your door. And PackTech's packaging solutions deliver better market presence. And finally, Clarion is the expert in food-grade lubricants. Thank you for their support of this podcast. Chris Sidwa of Batch Brewing Company, and the book that homebrewers should go out and get called Brew a Batch, A Beginner's Guide to Homebrewed Beer. Is there something that you wish you knew back as a beginning homebrewer that you know now?
Well, just touching on the book, which was incredibly fun to write. I'm so privileged that they
the only person who's written
invited
a book that
me
says
to do
that.
Yeah. No, it was a great chance to step away from the brewery and think about why I started homebrewing in the first place. One of the things I guess I would tell my budding homebrewer self is, if you do want to get really good at it, just pick one recipe and do it 6 times. And I mean, that's when I transitioned my thinking from just brew whatever the hell I want because I'm just having fun on my weekends to I'm actually going to try to make a run at this as a career. I need to know if I can actually make beer. We brewed 6 batches of our pale ale, and by the 5th one, we were dead set that we'd landed on a winner. And from that, having that core ability to understand attenuation and flavor balance, you can brew anything you want. Like if you just nail those things, clean ferment and balance, then it opens up every style, and you'll never miss by much ever again. So that's what I tell myself.
Awesome. If people are in Australia, even if you're not, where can they find Batch?
Can only find it in Australia. We're in key markets: Melbourne, Brisbane, a bit in Perth, a little bit in Adelaide, but primarily 85% of our volume stays in Sydney. And most
and
of
you have the
that's
2 tap
around the
rooms.
city. Yeah, we've got the one tap room in Marrickville, which has been buzzing for years, and the one in Petersham is opening on the 3rd of August.
Cool. Chris Sidwa, thanks so much for sitting down with me this morning. This was a lot of fun, and I'm eager to see what happens next. And we'll check in, I hope, again soon on the Australian,
have to get you down
US,
to Australia and visit the brewery again.
Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, John.
Of course. Dear listeners, if you have questions for me, guests you'd like to hear, topics you'd like addressed, you can always reach out to me at johnhall@beerandbrewing.com. That's JOHNHOLL. You can also join the conversation on Twitter at John_Hall. You should also go to beerandbrewing.com. That's where the magazine lives online. You can subscribe there to the print edition. Please subscribe to the print edition. You can also catch up on what's happening in this craft beer scene. You can read reviews, and you can find out recipes and read recipes and then make them yourselves coming directly from the pros that are out there right now. So that's beerandbrewing.com. And we'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Thanks again for listening.
This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.